In 1511, a group of religious leaders in Mecca decided coffee should be illegal. Not taxed. Not restricted. Illegal. People caught drinking it could be beaten. Some said it should be punished by death. Over a bean. Today, more than 2 billion cups of coffee get consumed every single day. So somewhere between banned drink and morning ritual for half the planet, something huge happened. And by the end of this video, you'll understand why coffee almost never made it out of one mountain in Ethiopia, and how it became the most powerful drug humans have ever legalized. Here's where the story actually starts, and it's kind of ridiculous. Historians believe coffee was discovered in Ethiopia, sometime around the 9th century, by a goat herder named Kaldi. The story goes that Kaldi noticed his goats acting strange after eating red berries from a certain bush. They weren't grazing calmly. They were practically dancing. So Kaldi tried the berries himself. And according to legend, he got just as energetic as his goats. Now, we can't confirm every detail of that story. It's part legend, part history. But what we do know is real. Those berries were coffee cherries. And that discovery, whether it happened exactly like that or not, changed the world. But here's where things get strange. For centuries, coffee stayed almost a secret, locked inside Ethiopia and nearby Yemen. Sufi monks across the Red Sea started brewing it to stay awake during long nights of prayer. It wasn't a treat. It was a tool. A way to stay alert, stay focused, stay devoted. And that single-use religious focus is what pushed coffee out of the mountains and into ports, mosques, and cities across the Arab world. But staying awake for prayer was about to turn into something the religious leaders never expected. By the early 1500s, coffee houses had exploded across Mecca. People gathered to drink coffee, talk, play games, even discuss politics. And that's exactly what scared the authorities. Historians point to a local governor who decided coffee was dangerous. Not because of caffeine. Because of conversation. He believed coffee houses were breeding grounds for gossip and rebellion against the government. So he banned it. Punishments got brutal in some regions of the empire. And here's the part most people get wrong. Coffee wasn't banned because it was bad for your health. It was banned because it made people talk to each other. Which, when you think about it, is kind of insane. But that ban didn't stop coffee. It only slowed it down for a moment. Within decades, the ban collapsed, and coffee exploded across the Ottoman Empire. Coffee houses became known as schools of the wise. People went there to debate ideas, hear poetry, and trade news, sort of like the internet, except with actual eye contact. Coffee wasn't just a drink anymore. It was a lifestyle and eventually a threat again. Because information moves fast in a room full of caffeinated people. And soon, that same energy was about to cross an entire sea and terrify a completely different part of the world. When coffee reached Europe in the 1600s, it freaked people out. Some religious leaders in Italy reportedly called it the bitter invention of Satan, partly because it came from the Muslim world, and partly because, well, people fear what they don't understand. Legend says a pope was asked to ban it, and if you're enjoying this deep dive into how a bean nearly got outlawed by 2 different religions, go ahead and subscribe, because the next part gets even wilder. According to that same legend, once he tasted it, he loved it so much he basically blessed it instead, joking it would be a shame to let only infidels enjoy something so delicious. True or not, that story marks the moment coffee got the church's approval. And once that happened, there was no stopping it. Coffee houses spread across London, Paris, and Vienna almost overnight. In England, they got a nickname, penny universities. For the price of one coffee, you could sit for hours, listen to writers, scientists, and merchants argue about everything from politics to stock prices. Some historians even trace the roots of the London Stock Exchange back to conversations that happened inside a single coffee house. Coffee wasn't fueling naps. It was fueling ideas. Big ones. The kind that build empires. And speaking of empires, Europe was about to do something coffee had never survived anywhere else. Leave its home continent completely. For a long time, the Arab world guarded coffee like a secret weapon. Exporting raw coffee plants was illegal. You could buy roasted beans, but never a living plant, because that would mean losing control of the entire supply. But secrets like that never last. Around the early 1600s, historians believe fertile coffee seeds were smuggled out of Yemen. Later, Dutch traders got their hands on plants too, and started growing coffee in their colonies, from Java to South America. One single smuggled plant, according to some historians, may have been the ancestor of nearly every coffee plant that exists in the Americas today. One plant. Think about that. That smuggled lineage eventually made its way to Brazil in the early 1700s. And Brazil didn't just grow coffee. It became obsessed with it. By the 1800s, Brazil was producing more coffee than the rest of the world combined. But that growth came at a horrifying cost. Much of it was built using enslaved labor, forced to work coffee plantations under brutal conditions. It's a part of coffee's story that doesn't get told nearly enough, and it should never be skipped over. Because the coffee industry we know today was shaped just as much by exploitation as it was by trade routes and lucky accidents. By the early 1900s, coffee had a new problem. It wasn't convenient enough. So inventors raced to create something that could dissolve instantly in hot water. Instant coffee wasn't perfected overnight, but by World War I and especially World War II, it became essential. Soldiers needed caffeine that traveled easily and brewed fast. Governments shipped millions of pounds of instant coffee to the front lines. And that wartime demand didn't just keep soldiers awake. It permanently normalized coffee as a daily habit for millions of people back home too. Fast forward to the late 20th century, and coffee gets reinvented again. In 1971, a small shop opened in Seattle selling roasted coffee beans. You know the name, Starbucks. Within a few decades, coffee houses weren't just places to grab a quick cup anymore. They became a whole identity, a place to work, meet, and be seen. This era is often called the second wave of coffee. And it wouldn't be the last wave either. Eventually, a new movement pushed back. People started asking where their coffee actually came from, which farm, which region, which process. This became known as the third wave, treating coffee less like a commodity and more like wine, something worth understanding, not just drinking. Suddenly, baristas were talking about altitude, fermentation, and tasting notes. The same plant that started with a herd of dancing goats was now being studied like fine art. Today, coffee is one of the most traded commodities on Earth. It supports the livelihoods of over 100 million people worldwide, from farmers to roasters to that barista who somehow remembers your order. A drink that was once outlawed, feared, and smuggled across oceans is now something most of us can't imagine starting a day without. So here's the real answer to that big question. Coffee almost never left Ethiopia. It almost got wiped out by a ban in Mecca. It almost stayed a secret forever, if one plant hadn't been smuggled out under someone's robes. But it survived every single attempt to stop it. Because coffee was never really about the caffeine. It was about what happens when people gather, talk, and share ideas over something warm. That's the real reason coffee conquered the world. And it's the same reason coffee culture keeps evolving today. So next time you hold that cup, remember, you're holding centuries of banned conversations. And if you want to know how another everyday drink was once considered nearly as dangerous, stick around because the history of tea is even stranger than this.